Commander Vexthon floated in his command chamber, 6 arms working across holographic displays that showed detailed images of the third planet from a yellow star. Earth, the humans called it. For 47 cycles, the Zephyrian Collective had watched this world from the dark spaces between stars. They had seen enough. The blue and green planet turned slowly on the main screen. Vexthon's large black eyes studied the data streams flowing past him. Human cities sparkled like scattered gems across the continents, but it was not the cities that interested him. It was what moved between them. "Show me the military analysis again," Vexthon commanded with a gesture of his primary arm. The display changed to show recordings of human warfare. Massive metal vehicles rolled across battlefields, spitting fire and smoke. Flying machines screamed through the sky, dropping explosive devices on targets below. Large ships floated on the planet's vast oceans, bristling with weapons that could throw metal projectiles incredible distances. Sub-Commander Yilthek drifted closer to the display. "They are primitive but determined," she said. "Their weapons use chemical explosions. Their armor is basic metal alloys. They fight in formations that are easy to predict." Vexthon nodded slowly. The Zephyrians had seen this pattern before on dozens of worlds. Species that relied on brute force and simple tactics. They built bigger weapons instead of smarter ones. They threw more soldiers at problems instead of finding better solutions. "Look at this battle recording," Yilthek said, manipulating the display. The screen showed human soldiers running across open ground toward enemy positions. Many fell to enemy fire, but more kept coming. They accept terrible losses to achieve small gains. It is wasteful. The recording showed more of the same. Humans driving their metal vehicles directly at enemy strongholds. Human aircraft diving straight into defensive fire to attack targets. Human ships sailing directly into battle zones where they faced overwhelming odds. "They know only one way to fight," Vexthon observed. "Forward. Always forward. No subtlety. No patience. They see an enemy and charge toward it." The intelligence reports confirmed what the recording showed. Human military doctrine was straightforward. Find the enemy. Bring superior numbers and firepower to bear. Overwhelm through persistence and aggression. It worked for them on their own world, but it would not work against the collective. Vexthon called up technical specifications of human weapons. Their projectile weapons fired small pieces of metal using controlled chemical explosions. Effective against other humans, but the collective's energy shields would stop such primitive attacks easily. Their explosive devices relied on simple chemical reactions, powerful in large quantities but crude compared to Zephyrian plasma charges. "What of their defensive capabilities?" Vexthon asked. "Basic," Yilthek replied. "Metal armor on their vehicles and soldiers. Some energy detection systems, but limited range and accuracy. They have early warning networks, but our stealth technology makes them useless." The data painted a clear picture. Humans were dangerous to each other, but they would be no match for Zephyrian technology. The collective had fought and conquered 17 species across the galaxy. Most had been more advanced than these humans. None had survived contact with Zephyrian forces for more than a few planetary rotations. Vexthon studied population data next. Billions of humans spread across their single world. A large number, but not impossibly so. The key was breaking their command structure quickly. Cut off the head and the body would fall. Humans seemed to rely heavily on centralized control. Destroy their leadership centers and their military would collapse into confusion. Their communication systems. Vexthon inquired. "Electromagnetic radiation and primitive quantum entanglement," Yilthek answered. "We can jam or intercept all of it. They will be blind and deaf within the first phase of attack." The recording showed human commanders directing battles from fixed positions. They used radio signals that the collective could easily disrupt. Their supply lines were predictable, following established routes between population centers. Cut those lines and human forces would run out of ammunition and fuel within days. Vexthon felt the familiar satisfaction that came before a successful conquest. Everything was proceeding according to standard protocols. Study the target species, identify their strengths and weaknesses, develop countermeasures, execute the invasion plan. "What concerns you about them?" Vexthon asked his sub-commander. It was always wise to hear different perspectives before committing to battle. Yilthek was quiet for a moment. "They are more aggressive than most species we have encountered. They seem to prefer fighting over negotiating, but that may work in our favor. Aggressive enemies make predictable mistakes. The psychological profiles supported this assessment. Humans appeared to be driven by strong emotions. They fought harder when angry or when protecting something they valued. But emotions also made them reckless. They would charge into obvious traps if sufficiently provoked. Their planet has many separate political groups, Vexthon noted, reading from the cultural analysis. They fight among themselves frequently. We can exploit these divisions. Yes, Yilthek agreed. Their history shows constant warfare between different human factions. They have never truly unified. Even when facing external threats, we can turn some groups against others. The strategy was becoming clear. The collective would strike at major population and command centers simultaneously. Superior technology would overwhelm human defenses in the first wave. Disrupted communications would prevent coordinated responses. Divided human factions would blame each other instead of working together. Within one planetary rotation, Earth would surrender or face total destruction. Vexthon began reviewing fleet deployments. 200 Zephyrian warships waited in the outer system, their crews ready for battle. Each ship carried enough firepower to level a human city. Their energy weapons could slice through any armor humans possessed. Their shields could deflect any attack human weapons could deliver. Begin final preparations, Vexthon commanded. All ships are to complete weapons checks and move to assault positions. We attack when their primary continent faces away from their star. Darkness will add to their confusion. The holographic displays around him came alive with activity. Ship positions updated in real time as the fleet moved into formation. Weapon systems activated and ran diagnostic cycles. Marines prepared assault shuttles for ground operations that would follow the orbital bombardment. Vexthon felt confident in his calculations. The humans would resist, of course. They might even inflict some casualties on collective forces, but their resistance would be brief and futile. Within days, Earth would join the growing list of worlds under Zephyrian control. The commander did not know that human eyes were already watching his fleet. Deep space monitoring stations had detected the approaching ships weeks ago. Emergency signals had gone out to military commands across Earth. But these were not the signals Zephyrian intelligence had expected to intercept hidden communication networks, carried coded messages to facilities that did not appear on any public records. Training camps in remote locations received activation orders. Small teams of specialists began moving toward predetermined positions. Men and women who had spent years learning to become invisible prepared to show an alien enemy what humanity was truly capable of. The conventional forces that Zephyrian sensors had cataloged so carefully were indeed preparing for battle. But they were not Earth's only defenders. In the shadows, something far more dangerous was stirring, something the aliens had never seen before because they had not known to look for it. The invasion fleet continued its approach, confident in victory. Soon they would learn that studying an enemy's conventional forces was not always enough. Sometimes the most dangerous weapons were the ones you never saw coming. The first Zephyrian plasma beam struck Earth's atmosphere at exactly 0347 hours, local time over the Pacific. Brilliant green fire lit up the night sky as alien warships descended through the clouds like falling stars. Air defense systems around the world screamed warnings that came too late to matter. Colonel Sarah Martinez watched the tactical displays in NORAD's command center as red symbols multiplied across the screens. Each symbol represented an alien ship, and there were far too many of them. The enemy had achieved complete surprise just as their intelligence suggested they would. All units, this is Control, she spoke into her headset. Execute Plan Yankee. Repeat, execute Plan Yankee. Across the globe, military bases erupted into action. Fighter jets roared off runways, their pilots knowing they flew toward an enemy with superior technology. Tank units rolled out of motor pools, their crews understanding they faced weapons that could cut through their armor like paper. Naval vessels put to sea, their captains aware their ships might not survive the first engagement. The first air battle took place over the California coast. 12 F-35 Lightning fighters intercepted a formation of alien craft that looked like glowing triangles moving against the laws of physics. The human pilots had trained for this moment, but training could not prepare them for reality. Lieutenant Kevin Thompson was the first to fire. His air-to-air missiles streaked toward the nearest alien ship, their heat-seeking guidance systems locked onto what looked like engine signatures. The missiles struck something invisible 300 meters from their target and exploded harmlessly against energy shields. Negative effect, Thompson shouted into his radio. Their shields are stopping everything. The alien response was immediate and devastating. Beams of green energy lanced out from the triangular craft, moving faster than human eyes could follow. Two F-35s simply vaporized, turned into expanding clouds of superheated metal and plastic. Three more spiraled toward the ocean, their control systems fried by electromagnetic pulses. Thompson dove toward the deck, pulling his fighter into a desperate, evasive pattern. Behind him, the surviving human aircraft scattered, their pilots reporting the same thing. Human weapons could not penetrate alien defenses, but alien weapons cut through human aircraft like they were made of tissue paper. The pattern repeated itself around the world. Over Germany, Eurofighter Typhoons lasted less than 3 minutes against alien interceptors. Above the Mediterranean, French Rafale fighters managed to damage one alien ship through weight of numbers, but lost 8 aircraft doing it. Russian MiG-29s over Siberia tried a different approach, using terrain to mask their approach. But alien sensors saw through every human stealth technology. On the ground, the results were similar but slower. Alien landing craft descended on major military bases, disgorging soldiers in powered armor that moved like liquid metal. Human ground forces responded with everything they had. At Fort Hood, the 1st Cavalry Division met the aliens in the first major ground engagement. M1A2 Abrams tanks opened fire at maximum range, their depleted uranium rounds striking alien vehicles with tremendous force. Some shots penetrated, proving the enemy was not invincible. But for every alien vehicle destroyed, 3 human tanks died in return. Captain Robert Chen commanded a company of Abrams tanks during the battle. His unit managed to destroy 2 alien hovercraft using coordinated fire from multiple directions. But the cost was terrible. Alien plasma weapons melted through tank armor like it was butter, cooking crews alive inside their vehicles. "They're stronger than us," Chen reported to his battalion commander. "But they're not gods. We can hurt them if we use the right tactics." The human military doctrine adapted quickly. Instead of meeting aliens in open battle, commanders began using terrain and buildings for cover. Infantry teams with anti-tank weapons ambushed alien patrols from hidden positions. Artillery units fired from concealed locations and moved immediately after shooting. But even as human forces learned to inflict casualties on their enemies, the aliens were achieving their strategic objectives. Major cities came under bombardment from orbital platforms. Government buildings turned to rubble under precision strikes. Communication networks failed as satellites were destroyed or jammed. General Patricia Williams, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, coordinated the defense from a bunker deep under the Pentagon. The situation reports flowing across her desk painted a grim picture. Human forces were fighting bravely and learning fast, but they were losing ground everywhere. "Casualty reports, sir," her aide said, handing her a tablet. "Preliminary estimates show we've lost 60% of our air assets and 40% of our armor in the first 12 hours. Williams studied the numbers. Bad but not catastrophic. Human forces were inflicting casualties too. Intelligence suggested the aliens had lost perhaps 10% of their invasion force. Not enough to stop them, but enough to make them cautious. "What about the special programs?" Williams asked quietly. "All assets have gone dark as planned," the aide replied. "No contact since the activation order." Williams nodded. The conventional forces were doing their job, drawing alien attention and learning enemy capabilities. But the real war was only beginning. Hidden across the globe, small teams of specialists were moving into position. Men and women trained for missions that regular soldiers could not imagine. In the chaos of the first day's fighting, strange reports began reaching alien commanders. A supply convoy disappeared between 2 checkpoints, its escort vehicles found empty with no signs of battle. A communications relay went offline for 17 minutes, then resumed function with no explanation. Sentries at a forward base reported movement in areas their sensors showed as empty. Sub-Commander Hilthek dismissed these incidents as equipment malfunctions or nervous soldiers seeing things that were not there. The human military was performing exactly as predicted. Their conventional forces fought bravely but hopelessly, using tactics the collective had seen countless times before. But other Zephyrian officers were less certain. Colonel Vorthak, commanding ground forces in the European sector, noticed patterns in the supposed equipment failures. They always happened at tactically significant moments. They always affected systems that supported combat operations. They always occurred in areas where humans should not have been able to penetrate. Request increased security protocols. Vorthak transmitted to Fleet Command. I believe human infiltration teams may be operating behind our lines. Impossible, came the reply from Yilthek. Our sensors would detect any human approach. Their technology cannot mask heat signatures or movement patterns from our detection systems. Vorthak wanted to argue, but he had no proof. The humans he had fought so far used straightforward tactics and equipment he could understand. Tanks that moved on treads, soldiers that carried weapons and wore visible armor, aircraft that flew using conventional propulsion. But something was wrong. Vorthak had fought in 7 conquest campaigns, and he had never experienced this many unexplained incidents. Equipment did not fail this often by coincidence. Supply routes did not experience this many delays due to random factors. On the 3rd day of fighting, Vorthak's suspicions were confirmed in the most direct way possible. He was reviewing tactical displays in his command post when the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in 3 seconds later, but those 3 seconds were enough. When the lights returned, Vorthak's communications officer was dead, his throat cut with surgical precision. The command post's main computer terminal had been destroyed by a small explosive charge. Most disturbing of all, someone had left a message written in Zephyrian text on the wall. "We see you." Security teams found no trace of the intruder. Sensors showed no record of anyone entering or leaving the command post. The killer had appeared like a ghost, struck without warning and vanished without a trace. For the first time since the invasion began, Zephyrian soldiers felt fear. The war was changing. What had started as a conventional conquest was becoming something else entirely. The aliens still held the advantage in technology and numbers, but they were beginning to understand that they faced an enemy unlike any they had encountered before. In the shadows, Earth's true defenders were finally beginning to move. Master Chief Petty Officer Jake Morrison had been underwater for 3 hours when the alien patrol boat passed overhead. He lay motionless on the bottom of the Potomac River, breathing through a rebreather that left no bubbles, watching alien sensor sweeps pass through the water around him like searchlights looking for something they could never find. The Zephyrian patrol boat was sleek and silent, hovering 2 meters above the water surface. Its sensors could detect heat signatures, electromagnetic emissions, and movement patterns with incredible precision. But they were designed to find conventional threats. They could not find a Navy SEAL who had become one with his environment. Morrison waited until the boat was exactly where he needed it to be. Then he moved with the fluid grace of someone who had spent 20 years learning to kill in the water. The magnetic charges he attached to the boat's hull were smaller than his fist, but they contained enough shaped explosive to crack the alien craft's anti-gravity generators. The explosion sent the patrol boat crashing into the river with a splash that could be heard for kilometers. Morrison was already gone, moving through the dark water like a predator returning to the depths. By the time alien rescue teams arrived, they found only wreckage and the beginning of their worst nightmare. 200 kilometers north, Captain Marcus Webb crouched in a hide site that had taken his Green Beret team 6 days to prepare. They had carved it into the side of a rocky hill, camouflaged it with local vegetation, and equipped it with observation equipment that could track alien movements across an entire valley. Webb had been watching the alien forward operating base for 18 hours. He knew the patrol schedules, the guard rotations, and the location of every sensor array. More importantly, he knew that the aliens believed their base was secure because their scanners showed no life signs within 5 kilometers. The aliens were wrong. Webb's team had been living within 300 meters of the base for a week, invisible to every detection system the enemy possessed. They had learned to move without creating heat signatures, to communicate without electromagnetic emissions, and to strike without warning. At precisely 02:30 hours, Webb gave the signal. 12 shaped charges detonated simultaneously across the alien base. Fuel storage tanks erupted in brilliant fireballs. Communications arrays toppled like broken trees. The main power generator died in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. But the real terror began when alien soldiers tried to respond to the attack. As they ran toward damaged equipment, snipers hidden in impossible positions began picking them off one by one. Alien troops found themselves dying to enemies they could not see, could not track, and could not fight. Sergeant First Class David Park lay prone behind a rock formation that alien sensors had scanned dozens of times without detecting anything unusual. His rifle was a work of art, modified with sound suppressors and muzzle flash eliminators that made it nearly invisible even when firing. The scope was calibrated for alien anatomy, targeting the weak points in their powered armor. Park's first shot dropped an alien officer at 800 meters. His second killed a technician trying to repair a communications dish. His third and fourth eliminated sentries who were supposed to be watching for exactly this kind of attack. Each shot was perfect, each kill was silent, and each death added to the growing panic among alien forces. The aliens tried to respond with standard countermeasures. They brought in additional sensors, increased patrol frequencies, and established overlapping fields of fire. But they were fighting an enemy that did not follow the rules of conventional warfare. Lieutenant Sarah Kim and her Delta Force team had infiltrated the alien command center while the attack was happening. They moved through ventilation systems too small for alien bodies, using thermal dampening suits that made them invisible to heat sensors. By the time the aliens realized they had been breached, Kim's team was already inside their most secure facility. The Delta operators moved like ghosts through corridors full of alien technology. They planted listening devices in command centers, sabotaged computer systems, and gathered intelligence that would save thousands of human lives. When they were done, they vanished as silently as they had come, leaving behind only confusion and fear. Colonel Vorthak stared at the reports flooding into his command center. In one night, his forces had lost 6 patrol boats, 2 forward operating bases, and a communications hub. 37 Zephyrian soldiers were dead, and twice that number were wounded. But most disturbing of all, his troops had not seen a single human attacker. "This is impossible," Sub-Commander Yilthek transmitted from the fleet command ship. "Our sensors show no large human formations in any of the affected areas." "Where are these attacks coming from?" Vorthak wanted to explain what he was beginning to understand, but he had no words for it. The humans he was fighting now were nothing like the soldiers his intelligence reports had described. These were not formations of tanks and aircraft following predictable patterns. These were individuals who moved like shadows and struck like lightning. "Request immediate reinforcement of all static positions," Vorthak replied, "and recommend deployment of close-range security teams around all critical facilities." "Denied," came the response. "You have adequate forces to deal with scattered human holdouts. Focus on consolidating territorial gains and preparing for the next phase of operations." But Vorthak knew these were not scattered holdouts. These were specialists, and they were just getting started. In the Scottish Highlands, a team of SAS operators was preparing an operation that would have been impossible for conventional forces. They had spent 3 days moving through terrain that alien maps showed as impassable, carrying equipment that would allow them to attack a target the enemy believed was beyond human reach. The alien supply depot sat in the middle of a valley, protected by energy barriers and automated defense systems. Sensor nets monitored every approach route, and patrol craft swept the area continuously. According to alien tactical doctrine, the facility was completely secure. Sergeant Major Robert Harrison knew better. He had been fighting behind enemy lines for 15 years, and he understood that there was no such thing as a completely secure position. Every defense had weaknesses. Every sensor had blind spots. Every enemy made assumptions that could be exploited. Harrison's team moved during a thunderstorm, using the electrical interference to mask their approach. They climbed cliffs that alien scanners dismissed as impassable, swam through underground streams that did not appear on enemy maps, and crossed open ground during the precise moment when patrol schedules created a gap in coverage. When they struck, the attack was devastating. The SAS team had learned to turn alien technology against itself, using captured equipment to create feedback loops that overloaded entire systems. The supply depot's own defensive barriers became weapons that tore the facility apart from the inside. But the psychological impact was even more important than the physical damage. Alien commanders were beginning to realize that nowhere was safe. No position was secure. No technology could protect them from an enemy that refused to fight by the rules they understood. Reports of similar attacks began flooding in from around the globe. Russian Spetsnaz teams were operating behind alien lines in Eastern Europe, using techniques that made them invisible to every form of detection. Australian SSR operators were turning the outback into a nightmare for alien forces, appearing out of empty desert to strike and vanish again. French Foreign Legion specialists were conducting operations in urban areas that conventional forces would have found impossible. Canadian JTF-2 operators were using the Arctic environment as a weapon against enemies adapted for different climates. German KSK teams were proving that human determination could overcome any technological advantage. Each operation was small, involving only a handful of soldiers. But the cumulative effect was massive. Alien supply lines were under constant threat. Communications networks suffered regular failures. Forward positions faced attacks that came from directions that should have been impossible. More importantly, alien morale was beginning to crack. Soldiers who had conquered 17 worlds found themselves afraid to leave their bases. Officers who had planned the invasion with complete confidence now jumped at shadows and saw threats in every scanner malfunction. The invisible war had begun, and the aliens were learning a lesson that no amount of technological superiority could overcome. In warfare, the most dangerous enemies were often the ones you never saw coming, and humans had been perfecting the art of invisible warfare for centuries. The Zephyrian Collective had studied Earth's conventional military and found it manageable. But they had never known to look for the warriors who lived in the shadows, who made themselves one with darkness, and who could turn any battlefield into their hunting ground. The war was far from over, but the balance was beginning to shift. In the darkness between alien patrols, Earth's most dangerous defenders were finally revealing themselves. Private Kexval had not slept properly in 6 days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw shadows moving in places where shadows should not be. Every time he heard a sound, he wondered if it was another human infiltrator coming to kill him and his squad mates while they slept. The young Zephyrian soldier sat in his guard position at Forward Base Talon, a facility that had once been considered the most secure installation in the North American sector. His weapon was charged and ready, his sensors were active, and his comm link was open to the command center. But none of that made him feel safe anymore. 3 nights ago, Kexval had been on duty when Corporal Yethan simply vanished from his post. The other guards found his weapon and equipment exactly where they should be, but Yethan himself was gone. Security recordings showed nothing. Sensor logs showed no intrusions. One moment Yethan was there, the next he was not. 2 nights ago it was Sergeant Multek. He had been conducting a routine patrol of the base perimeter when his comm signal cut out. The search team found his body an hour later, but not where he should have been. Somehow he had ended up inside a storage building that had been locked from the outside. His throat had been cut with surgical precision. Last night nothing happened. That was almost worse. The entire base stayed on high alert, waiting for an attack that never came. By morning, half the soldiers were so exhausted they could barely function, and the other half were seeing enemies that were not there. Contact, Grid 77 Alpha, a voice crackled over Kexval's comm unit. Possible movement near the fuel depot. Kexval turned his sensors toward the indicated area. He saw nothing unusual, but that meant little anymore. The humans seemed able to move without being detected by any technology the collective possessed. 3 squads rushed toward the fuel depot, weapons ready for battle. They found nothing, just like the last 12 alerts and the 12 before that. False alarms were becoming so common that soldiers were starting to ignore them. But that was dangerous too, because sometimes the alerts were real. Master Sergeant Chen Wei-Ming watched the alien response through night vision optics from a position that Zephyrian sensors had scanned and classified as empty terrain. He was actually lying inside a depression that he had spent 2 days carefully preparing, covered with materials that absorbed radar and thermal radiation. Chen had been observing Forward Base Talon for a week, learning patrol patterns and response procedures. He was not planning to attack the base. His mission was more subtle and ultimately more destructive. He was there to make the aliens afraid. Fear was a weapon that could be more effective than bullets or explosives. A frightened enemy made mistakes. They wasted resources chasing phantoms. They wore themselves out with constant vigilance. Most importantly, they lost confidence in their equipment and their leaders. Chen keyed his radio with a transmission so brief and low-powered that alien sensors would dismiss it as background noise. Thunder 6, this is Ghost 1, package delivered. Beginning Phase 2. 40 kilometers away, Captain Lisa Rodriguez received the message and smiled grimly. Chen's psychological operations were working perfectly. Intelligence intercepts showed that alien morale was dropping rapidly across all sectors. Units were reporting everything from equipment failures to supernatural encounters. Rodriguez commanded a joint task force of special operations soldiers from 6 different nations. Her mission was unlike anything in military history. Instead of destroying enemy forces, she was tasked with destroying enemy confidence. Instead of winning battles, she was winning minds. The psychological campaign had multiple components. Some teams conducted actual attacks to keep aliens focused on physical threats. Others gathered intelligence to support future operations. But the most important teams did nothing but exist in places where they should not be able to survive. Staff Sergeant Vladimir Petrov was a master of this invisible presence. The former Spetsnaz operator had spent 3 weeks living within the security perimeter of an alien command base, surviving on captured supplies and rainwater. He had not killed anyone or destroyed anything, but his mere presence was driving the base commander toward a nervous breakdown. Petrov left small signs that he was there. A footprint in mud where patrols would find it. Equipment moved slightly from where it had been left. Food packages opened and partly consumed. Nothing dramatic, nothing that could not be explained by careless soldiers or equipment malfunctions. But the cumulative effect was devastating. The alien base commander, Colonel Thex Mori, had tripled security patrols and installed additional sensor arrays. He had interrogated his own soldiers, searching for saboteurs or spies. He had even requested orbital scans of the entire facility. But the signs continued to appear, and the invisible presence continued to haunt his command. "Sir, another incident report," Thex Mori's aide said, approaching with obvious reluctance. "Third platoon found their equipment cache disturbed. Nothing taken but items rearranged." Thex Mori studied the report with growing frustration. This was the 14th such incident in 5 days. His soldiers were beginning to whisper about ghosts and supernatural forces. Discipline was breaking down as fear spread through the ranks. "Double the guard on all supply areas," Thex Mori ordered, "and install motion detectors in every storage facility." But Thex Mori knew the additional security would not solve his problem. The humans were using psychological warfare techniques that the collective had never encountered. They were attacking his soldiers' minds instead of their bodies, and conventional defenses were useless against such tactics. In the European theater, similar operations were having even more dramatic effects. A team of German KSK operators had been conducting a campaign that played on alien superstitions and cultural fears. They had learned that Zephyrians believed in spiritual entities that could possess technology and turn it against its users. Sergeant Major Klaus Hoffman used this knowledge to create what appeared to be supernatural attacks. His team would infiltrate alien facilities and reprogram their systems to malfunction at random intervals. Lights would flicker in patterns that resembled Zephyrian death rituals. Communications equipment would broadcast static that sounded like the voices of dead soldiers. Computer displays would show images from Zephyrian mythology. The effect on alien morale was catastrophic. Entire units refused to use certain equipment. Soldiers performed protective rituals before entering buildings. Officers spent more time dealing with supernatural fears than military planning. But the special operations teams were not just conducting psychological warfare. They were also learning. Each mission provided new intelligence about alien capabilities and weaknesses. Each encounter taught human operators more about how to fight a technologically superior enemy. Captain Emma Thompson and her SAS team had discovered that Zephyrian energy shields had a critical flaw. The shields were designed to stop high-energy impacts, but they had difficulty dealing with multiple low-energy strikes arriving simultaneously. A coordinated attack using conventional small arms could overload the shield generators if the timing was perfect. Thompson's team tested this discovery during a raid on an alien supply convoy. Instead of using anti-tank weapons that the shields could easily stop, her soldiers used assault rifles and machine guns to saturate the shield generators with projectiles. The sustained fire overloaded the alien defensive systems, allowing heavier weapons to penetrate and destroy the convoy. The intelligence was immediately shared with special operations units worldwide. Within days, similar tactics were being used from Australia to Alaska. Alien commanders found their most advanced defensive technology failing against weapons they had dismissed as primitive. Other discoveries followed rapidly. Navy SEALs learned that alien sensors could be blinded by creating electromagnetic interference at specific frequencies. Marine Force reconnaissance teams found that Zephyrian communication networks could be disrupted by introducing viral code through captured equipment. Army Rangers discovered that alien-powered armor had vulnerable joints that could be targeted with precision weapons. Each piece of intelligence made human special operations more effective. But more importantly, each successful mission proved that the aliens were not invincible. The psychological impact of this knowledge spread beyond the special operations community. Conventional forces began adopting tactics developed by elite units. Regular Army soldiers learned camouflage techniques that could fool alien sensors. Air Force pilots developed attack patterns based on special operations intelligence. Naval units used electronic warfare methods pioneered by special forces teams. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy that was constantly evolving. Tactics that worked one day failed the next. Equipment that had seemed invulnerable proved to have critical weaknesses. Soldiers who had appeared primitive began demonstrating capabilities that seemed impossible. Commander Vexthon studied the intelligence reports with growing concern. What had begun as a straightforward conquest was becoming something unprecedented in collective history. The humans were not just resisting, they were learning and adapting faster than any species the Zephyrians had ever encountered. Our psychological evaluation teams report widespread morale problems, Sub-Commander Yiltek informed him. Soldiers are refusing missions. Reporting Soup Commander Vexthon made the decision to retreat to orbital platforms after receiving the most disturbing report of the war. His most secure command facility had been infiltrated not once, but 3 times in a single night. Human operatives had moved through the base like ghosts, leaving behind evidence that they could strike anywhere, anytime, against anyone. Prepare all ships for immediate departure to high orbit, Vexthon commanded. We will direct operations from the fleet until ground-based resistance can be eliminated. Sub-Commander Yilthek nodded in agreement. The orbital platforms were beyond the reach of human ground forces. Protected by energy shields and automated defense systems, they offered safety that ground installations could no longer provide. From orbit, they could reorganize their forces and develop new strategies to counter human special operations. What neither alien commander knew was that human special operations teams had been preparing for this possibility since the invasion began. While conventional forces held alien attention on the surface, elite units had been training for the most ambitious mission in military history, taking the war to space itself. Captain Rebecca Torres floated in the cargo bay of a captured alien transport, watching her team make final preparations for an operation that would have been considered insane under normal circumstances. Her mixed unit of Navy SEALs, Delta Force operators, and astronauts had spent weeks learning to operate in zero gravity, using equipment reverse-engineered from alien technology. Final equipment check, Torres announced over the comm system. Remember, we get one chance at this. If we fail, Earth loses its best opportunity to end this war quickly. The mission was the culmination of months of intelligence gathering and preparation. Human teams had been tracking alien supply runs between the surface and orbital platforms, learning flight patterns and security procedures. More importantly, they had been capturing alien spacecraft and learning to operate them. Master Chief Jake Morrison checked his modified rebreather system, designed to provide life support in the vacuum of space. His weapons were alien energy rifles captured from previous operations and modified for human use. Most importantly, he carried demolition charges specifically designed to destroy Zephyrian technology from the inside. How long until intercept? Morrison asked the pilot. 17 minutes, came the reply from Lieutenant Sarah Kim, who had learned to fly alien spacecraft by studying captured manuals and practicing in simulators built from salvaged equipment. Their security protocols are exactly as intelligence predicted. The captured transport approached the main Zephyrian command ship using legitimate identification codes obtained during previous infiltration missions. To alien sensors, it appeared to be a routine supply run returning from the surface with wounded soldiers and equipment for repair. The massive alien vessel grew larger in the viewports as they approached. It was over 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could level cities and protected by shields that could deflect nuclear weapons. But like all complex systems, it had vulnerabilities that could be exploited by someone who understood how to find them. Docking authorization granted. The alien control tower transmitted. Proceed to Base 7 for medical transfer. The transport slid into the docking bay as smoothly as if it were actually operated by alien crew. Kim had become so proficient with the controls that her flying was indistinguishable from that of a Zephyrian pilot. The massive bay doors closed behind them, sealing the human team inside the heart of enemy territory. As soon as the atmospheric barriers activated, Torres gave the signal. Her team moved with the precision that came from months of training and years of experience. They knew exactly where to go and what to do, because they had studied the layout of this ship class through captured intelligence and previous infiltration missions. Sergeant First Class David Park led his demolition team toward the main power distribution center, moving through maintenance corridors that were too small for alien bodies, but perfectly sized for humans. They carried charges designed to create a cascade failure that would disable the ship's primary systems. Staff: Sergeant Vladimir Petrov and his electronics warfare specialists headed for the communications center, where they would plant devices to monitor alien transmissions and potentially take control of the ship's information systems. Their equipment was a hybrid of human ingenuity and captured alien technology. Master Sergeant Chen Wei-Ming took his team toward the command center, with a mission to gather intelligence and eliminate key personnel if the opportunity arose. They moved like shadows through corridors that should have been impenetrable to any human force. But the most ambitious part of the mission was being carried out by Lieutenant Colonel James Wright and his assault team. They were heading for the ship's main computer core, where they planned to upload a virus that would spread throughout the entire Zephyrian fleet network. Wright had been one of the first to understand that defeating the aliens required more than tactical victories. The enemy's technological advantage came from their integrated computer systems, which allowed rapid coordination across vast distances. Disrupt those systems, and even the most advanced alien technology would become useless. The virus Wright carried was a masterpiece of human creativity and alien reverse engineering. Developed by the best computer scientists and hackers on Earth, it was designed to appear as a routine system update, while actually creating backdoors that would allow human forces to monitor and interfere with alien operations. As the teams moved toward their objectives, they encountered the first sign that their mission might not be going according to plan. Alien security patrols were more numerous than expected, and they seemed to be searching for something specific. "Control, this is Wright," the colonel whispered into his comm unit. "Heavy security presence near the computer core, possible indication that they know we're here." Torres considered the implications. Either the aliens had discovered their infiltration, or they were responding to previous human operations by increasing security throughout their fleet. Either way, the mission would be more dangerous than planned. All teams continue with objectives, Torres decided. We may not get another chance like this. The teams pressed forward, using their training to avoid detection while moving deeper into the ship. They had learned that alien sensors had blind spots, and they exploited every weakness in the enemy's security systems. Park's demolition team reached the power distribution center first. The chamber was vast, filled with energy conduits that hummed with enough power to supply a small city. Park and his specialists began placing shaped charges at critical junction points, calculating exactly how much explosive force would be needed to create a total system failure. As they worked, alien technicians moved through the chamber on routine maintenance tasks. The humans remained hidden, using camouflage techniques that made them invisible even to observers only meters away. When the aliens left, the demolition charges were armed and ready. Petrov's team infiltrated the communications center using ventilation systems that alien designers had never considered as security vulnerabilities. They found themselves looking down on a chamber filled with sophisticated equipment that controlled communications for the entire invasion fleet. Working with tools designed specifically for this mission, Petrov's specialists began installing monitoring devices and preparing to upload software that would give human intelligence services access to all alien communications. The work required absolute precision, because a single mistake would trigger security systems and doom the entire mission. Chen's team had reached a position where they could observe the main command center. Through specially designed periscopes, they watched alien officers directing the orbital bombardment of Earth's cities. The intelligence they gathered would be invaluable for planning future operations, even if the current mission failed. But it was Wright's team that faced the greatest challenge. The computer core was protected by multiple layers of security that required them to defeat both technological and physical barriers. They had to disable guard posts, bypass electronic locks, and avoid automated defense systems. When they finally reached the core chamber, Wright was amazed by what he saw. The alien computer system was a work of art, a crystalline matrix that processed information using principles that human science was only beginning to understand. But like all computers, it had vulnerabilities that could be exploited. Wright began the upload process using equipment that interfaced directly with alien technology. The virus spread slowly through the system, disguising itself as routine maintenance code while actually creating pathways that would allow human hackers to access the entire Zephyrian network. Upload at 60%, Wright reported. Estimate 4 more minutes to completion. But those 4 minutes felt like hours as alien security teams began searching the ship more systematically. Alert signals echoed through the corridors as the enemy realized that their most secure facility had been compromised. Multiple contact signals, Torres reported from her command position. All teams prepare for emergency extraction. The human operators had planned for this contingency. They knew that once their presence was discovered, they would have only preternatural encounters and